Life Audio.
Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, the podcast where we tackle real-life parenting and homeschooling challenges and explore practical solutions for teaching children who learn differently. I'm your host, Peggy Ployhar, and today we're diving into a topic that hits close to home for so many of us, especially those parenting unique learners. Let me say something. Have you ever felt like the constant buzz of noise, media, schedules is leaving your family stressed, reactive, emotionally strained? Maybe your child's meltdowns after an outing, or you feel just overwhelmed before the day even begins. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And today's episode is for you. Our guest, Sarah Boyd, a child and adolescent development expert and founder of Resilient Little Hearts and author of a new book called Turn Down the Noise, a practical guide to building an emotionally healthy family in a chronically overstimulated world. Sarah joins us today to share the neuroscience behind overstimulation, how high sensitivity can shape your child's experience, and most importantly, what you can do to help your family cultivate calm, resilience, and emotional health in the midst of our noisy world. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and also visit us at spedhomeschool.com to learn more about our free resources and homeschooling and practical advice and freebies for homeschooling your unique learner. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me, Peggy. I'm really excited for today's conversation.
Yes, I am too. I had an episode recently where I was interviewing somebody that was talking about oversensitive moms. And I was like, that was me.
Yeah.
And then I had those oversensitive children, and it just kind of snowballs and you pass it along. And unfortunately, the uncoping skills you have, you just cultivate them in your home. And so I love what you're going to be sharing about, because it's going to be kind of like a second iteration of that, but from the child's perspective as well as the family perspective. And that'll be super, super helpful. So excited for our conversation for sure. So you have a new book that's out, Turn Down the Noise. And I think that resonates with so many families. Can you unpack what that noise really is in today's culture and how it affects both parents and children?
Yeah, so the book is essentially about managing overstimulation and then chronic stress in family life. And so when we talk about the concept of noise, really I'm using that as a metaphor for any type of ongoing stress, overstimulation, pace of life, pressure, whether it's work or home or schooling, anything that's just like placing pressure and stress on the person and the family unit. And really, obviously, the metaphor is seeing how we can turn down the unnecessary noise. You know, we know that stress can be really some level of stress or arousal, as psychological literature talks about it, is helpful for focus and paying attention. But when it gets chronic or too much, it becomes a distractor to that. And so I wanted to give families a handbook to know what to look for, when to know when to do stuff, and when to turn it down.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that is helpful, because I think you're in the midst of it or the chaos of it. And sometimes we don't even know we're in it.
Yes, it's so true.
Yeah. And then it takes over and we're like, well, why did I just do that? Or why did my child just have a meltdown? And it catches us off guard. So, that's a great way to use that analogy, because I love that. Because you can physically like see that and turning it, and you want some degree, like you said, to kind of boost us towards things. Because if we had no stimulation at all, we'd be like, yeah. We don't have kids there either. So that's good.
And I think too, I liked the metaphor because it's often not one thing that causes us to have those big reactions, or our children to have those big reactions. It's typically a buildup of lots of things. And there may be one or two things we can point to that are a little bit more obvious, but it's typically how much sleep you got the night before, how stressed you are coming into the day, how stressed they are coming into the day. And then it just builds over time like a snowball. And so the idea of like it being noise of all the things we need to turn down, I think could be helpful for families.
Absolutely. Yes. Because we don't even realize some of those are around. Can you describe why this is an invisible epidemic? How does this chronic state just show up in children's behavior and emotions when we we feel like they just come out of the blue instead of like, oh yeah, no, we saw that coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously I write about it being an invisible epidemic in our modern world. It is something that has become the fabric or kind of the environment that we're just living in all the time. So it's that same idea that when you live in it all the time, you typically don't notice it. You know, I'm Australian and, you know, I lived in California for 8 years, and coming from a different culture, you notice things in different cultures.
Yes, that is true.
And so overstimulation is like that. We're now living in this culture of like, you know, decades ago, we didn't have the media, we didn't have the pace of life, we didn't have the level of time stress, particularly on parents. And so that's something that's happening. And I also, in the kind of landscape of people talking about, you know, why do we have the reactions we have as parents, and why do our children have the reactions they have as parents? A lot of people have been talking about trauma and, you know, looking at that whole thing of learning skills. And I think that's incredibly important. But what I didn't hear many people talking about is just overstimulation, that separate to trauma and that you can have this stress and this arousal in your body and neurologically that you have this reaction. And so I wanted to kind of contribute it to the conversation to say, hey, it's not always that. Sometimes it's actually this. And this is actually something that is like pretty simple and straightforward that we can adjust in our homes.
Right. Yeah. Because some of those bigger things, I mean, you can't control that those things are going to happen, and so yes, but this is something we can to a degree control. And so why not? And so I love that. What does the latest neuroscience say about how a parent's brain and nervous system react under stress? And why do we often feel ourselves overreacting in those hard moments?
Yeah. So a lot of this comes back to the neuroscience of overwhelm. And so essentially, if we were to simplify it, there's two parts of the brain. There's our limbic brain, which is the place that we have all our unfiltered emotional reactions, and we're receiving all the input and we're just like absorbing the world. And then the other part of our brain, in very simple terms, is our prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of our brain that makes us a healthy, mature individual. It controls our self-regulation. So it stops us from saying the things that we would like to say. It helps us make healthy decisions, plan for the future, filter that information, and then decide what to do with it. And so this is really the basis of a lot of what we see, because the limitation of the prefrontal cortex is it has limited energy to be used well before it needs a break again. And so if you think about your limbic brain, it's kind of like your trusty family car. It's the one you can rely on. It just keeps going no matter what. Whereas our prefrontal cortex is kind of like a racing car. It can go really fast and be really effective for short periods of time, but then it needs a break. And so that is at the essence of what happens for a lot of parents, if we look at them first, is that we are using all of this cognitive energy that we don't give ourselves enough credit for to get our kids up and going in the morning, to plan the homeschooling day, to actually like work out what needs to happen, to be on top of just appointments and doctors and all of those
so
routines.
Much.
And we're using all of this, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for how many times we held our tongue, responded calmly when our child was not responding calmly. But eventually what happens is our prefrontal cortex kind of runs out of juice. And if we don't have small breaks throughout the day, or we're not aware of that happening, that can be the thing that reacts in this big reaction. On the child's side, their prefrontal cortex doesn't come to full maturity until young adulthood. And so that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with all these kind of cognitive limitations where we have the mature prefrontal cortex. Hopefully we're wanting to be the healthy, calm adult in the process. But even as a healthy adult, we still have these limitations. And so a lot of this work is actually about learning to live within those limitations.
Yeah. And that's where, boundaries come in hugely, because we have to know those. We will continue this conversation after a short break.
For more than 100 years, the Salvation Army has responded to natural disasters. But few have broken our hearts more than what occurred in Texas on the 4th of July. Like you, we grieve for those who lost their lives in those terrible floods and are praying for their loved ones and the survivors of this terrible tragedy. The Salvation Army has mobilized our disaster relief teams to provide hundreds of meals, food, water, and emergency relief supplies to support first responders and to help survivors begin the process of healing and recovery. You can help support Salvation Army disaster relief efforts with a donation at helpsalvationarmy.org or by calling 1-800-SAL-ARMY. That's 1-800-SAL-ARMY. Learn more about the Salvation Army's continued efforts at disaster.salvationarmyusa.org. Thank you for helping the Salvation Army bring hope to those in need.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
So you talk about one of the most powerful tools that you is how to recognize and support highly sensitive children. How can a parent identify this trait in their child or even themselves that they do get to that point more often?
Yeah, so the trait of high sensitivity is a temperament, not a medical diagnosis. So it's something that about 20% of the population identify with. And these people are more sensitive to absorb and process sensory stimuli. So they're very deep thinkers. They're thinking about how the information they've just received connects with the information they already understand. They're thinking about the meaning of life and deep conversations. They're very in touch with their emotions. They're often very in touch with the beauty and meaning in life. But they do have a particular kryptonite, which is overstimulation. So meaning that they get overstimulation more often and more easily than others. And so one of the ways that you can identify this even in your child or yourself is purely just thinking through those questions. Am I naturally a deep thinker? Do I care a lot about the big issues in life? Do I find myself getting to the point where I've been in, say, a highly stimulating environment, such as a crowded shopping mall or a crowded party? Do I find myself I've taken in a lot of that? Am I very in touch with my own emotions and those of other people? And do I really care? I think about the beauty and the meaning and the connection in life. For children, you'll see it a lot in their sensory sensitivities. Do they hate socks? Do they not like to be near sand? Do they, if they get wet, do they need to change their clothes? All of those things are sometimes a sign. And I think it's important to say it is a separate thing from neurodivergence. So the current research talks about that you can have high sensitivity and be neurodivergent. You can be neurodivergent without high sensitivity. It's kind of, you can have both. There is obviously an overlap because part of the diagnosis for a lot of neurodivergence is the sensory sensitivity is one of the diagnosis criteria. But there are also a lot of people who have high sensitivity who don't have the other criteria.
Yeah, it's good to know, because I think we kind of just like lump them in and go, well, if your child's not that, then they must be dealing with another issue.
Yes. And I will say that, particularly for parents, if you begin to think, I might have high sensitivity, it is really important to think about and to be aware of if you can, because family life and raising children and homeschooling children is overstimulating. And because of that kryptonite of overstimulation, parents they're a little bit more vulnerable to burnout. And so having those boundaries of, when we say self-care, I'm not talking about going to a massage or something, but those little things of sleep and taking small breaks and having some time for yourself are even more important when you have the trait of high sensitivity.
Yeah. And I was definitely there. I couldn't even hold my kids because it bothered me so much to be so close to them. And, I talked to this with my other guests that we talked about the mom side of this. And and, I felt guilty for so long. And now that I understand it, it's like, okay, yes. And, I just, you know what you know, but it's so nice that more people are talking about it, because otherwise you do go into that like depression mode where must just be a bad parent, because I should like doing this. I should like being close to my kids, or I should have all the energy in the world to be able to pour into them all the time. But, it's just not true. And so
it's so true. I love that you bring that up, because it is, without that kind of information or that external feedback, we do tend to be very hard on ourselves as mothers, especially.
Right.
And because we feel responsible, and there's this picture of how we should be with our kids. And I do find that understanding the trait of high sensitivity can both be empowering but also frustrating for some people. I know that's how I have the trait of high sensitivity, and I get frustrated sometimes. I look at my husband and he can just keep going and it doesn't get affected. And I think this is so frustrating that, I get affected more. But it is just that thing of knowing everyone has a limit. Maybe if you have high sensitivity, your limits are closer in than if you didn't have this trait, but everyone still has a limit. And I think in our modern world where technology has become so intertwined with life, we begin to think we shouldn't have limits. We should be able to run at the same pace as machines.
Just upload a new version of me and we'll be good.
Right. But unfortunately we're human and we can't, be perfect in that all the time. And so when you do kind of recognize like you have the trait, like the examples that you were sharing, it takes the guilt off, and you can then strategize for how can I do this and also give my kids what they need and take care of myself in the same way. And so it really just, that awareness is really the biggest piece of it.
Absolutely. Yes. And I just had a scan done that told me I was highly sensitive to light, which was interrupting my sleep. And so my husband and I got blackout curtains, and I'm like a new person.
Yes.
I had no idea.
Yes.
So
Isn't that amazing?
Like that is, it's amazing. And so if parents are wondering, what everyday strategies or shifts that they can make for their highly sensitive kid, because I know I was totally frustrated when my middle child, every time I would make pork, would run out of the house. That smell totally bothered him.
Yes.
Smell is so much like me. But yes. So I love to hear what you have to say.
Yes. So I will say that still, if they are highly sensitive and they have some of those things, these things are not going to fix all of that in itself. But I think to be aware of with children with the trait of high sensitivity, they have a higher need for sleep, as do parents with high sensitivity, than those without the trait. So if you think of an adult needing 7 to 9 hours of sleep, an adult with high sensitivity needs 9 hours or above.
Wow.
So depending on the age of your child, if you look at the hours that's like recommended, they're highly sensitive children are the high end of what they actually need. So protecting sleep is a really big thing. Highly sensitive children and parents hate time pressure. So if you are constantly rushing, and that's not to say you can't ever rush, we live in the world and we have to be realistic. But if you're on the other extreme, always rushing, you're going to find your child resisting everything that you want to do, having the meltdowns.
Right.
And so having some times, whether it's every day or at least quite a few times a week, where they just have no things that they have to rush out the door for, can have a really, really big impact. Transitions are a really big challenge for children who are highly sensitive, as I'm sure with children who are neurodivergent as well. So using some strategies could be practical, like it's called front loading. I'm sure many are familiar with this, where you say in 10 minutes, we're stopping the activity, in 5 minutes, we're stopping the activity. And that's one strategy that you can use. Another strategy to use is visual routine charts or written routine charts or calendars, where you sit down with them and they have participation as well in what are we going to do when. That could be really helpful for particularly in a homeschooling environment of like giving them some control and autonomy with still within your boundaries. So it's like, do you want to do this subject before this subject? But you still have to do both subjects.
Right, exactly. Yes, yeah.
So some of those things can help. And I just think with some of the other sensory sensitivities is just having an awareness of it. And a lot of times when highly sensitive children have grown into adulthood and they were interviewed about what would have helped you more in childhood, most of the responses came back, I wish I just had one adult that understood. Because like what you mentioned before, there's this level of shame that happens. And that's something that also comes with the trait. Shame is something that highly sensitive individuals wrestle with more than people without the trait. It's just very close to them feeling, because they actually really want to do the right thing. And so when they feel like they've not done the right thing, the shame is there. But just having that, being that relationship for that child where you normalize, it's okay if you don't like the smell of pork. You know, it's okay if you respond the way that you respond. You're not a bad person. There's that level of understanding there. That can be a real gift to highly sensitive children just in and of itself.
We will continue this conversation after a short break.
For more than 100 years, the Salvation Army has responded to natural disasters, but few have broken our hearts more than what occurred in Texas on the 4th of July. Like you, we grieve for those who lost their lives in those terrible floods and are praying for their loved ones and the survivors of this terrible tragedy. The Salvation Army has mobilized our disaster relief teams to provide hundreds of meals, food, water, and emergency relief supplies to support first responders and to help survivors begin the process of healing and recovery. You can help support Salvation Army disaster relief efforts with a donation at helpsalvationarmy.org or by calling 1-800-SAL-ARMY. That's 1-800-SAL-ARMY. Learn more about the Salvation Army's continued efforts at disaster.salvationarmyusa.org. Thank you for helping the Salvation Army bring hope to those in need.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to my next question, talking about like reframing it, not as like something that is bad about you, but or that needs to be fixed. But how do we then approach it as this is a strength?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, high sensitivity, I believe, is a gift. It is what helps so many writers, creatives, like entrepreneurs make connections because they're so good at making connections. They think deeply about the meaning of things and the impact of things. So in any type of field of teachers and medical and political leadership, of all that sort of stuff, if we had more people with this gift thinking through what it would mean for other people, it is a huge gift. And you are also often the person in your world caring, being aware of other people's emotions from not in a codependent way, but just in a way of thinking about them and being able to check in on them and actually be that presence of love to them. And so it is, you know, like anything, a huge gift. And if you can just learn to manage some of the challenges, which is the overstimulation and sometimes that shame response, it can actually be a superpower. And that's really how I teach about it. It's almost like you're Superman. You've got this kryptonite thing of overstimulation that you have to stay away from if you can. But it is an amazing, incredible, I mean, highly sensitive parents make incredible parents. They are intentional. They are loving. They think really deeply about how to be a great parent. They often are very attuned to what are the unique interests of my child and how can I pull that out for them and how can I help them into their future. a lot more than people without the trait. And so just being aware and leaning into those strengths so that you're not spending the whole of your time feeling like, oh, no, this is frustrating about this side of the challenge can be a real gift.
Yeah. So I think, sometimes that might add to people that are highly sensitive. How do you keep from being overburdened because you are so sensitive of what others are thinking? Because I know sometimes a child has friends, and they get so burdened, and this has happened in my family. That's why I'm asking. They get so burdened about their friends' issues. And they can't disassociate that almost because they're so sensitive about what's going on with somebody else's life.
Yeah. So I think all of those moments are an opportunity for us to teach coping skills, which is a way of like, what do we do when the emotion comes? So we want to normalize the emotions or the feeling of taking on their friends' feelings. And also then, okay, here's me as a parent giving you an example of what I would do. And so in that particular situation, it could come down to, well, A, what do you think would support the friend? Let's do that. Do you think they need to just have a chat, or should we write them an encouraging letter or something like that? And then B, learning to release that like we would as adults. So we would, be there for that friend, pray for them, bless them, encourage them, try and be the support that we can. And then also learning to, one of the strategies I talk about in the book, which has actually had surprisingly some of the most feedback, is called loving detachment, which is actually when we learn to say, okay, I've done everything that I can do. Now I have to step back and lovingly surrender and trust. I don't hold up the world. I'm not God.
Right, exactly.
and I can trust that. And that's something that, is hard to learn. I mean, I find it hard to learn as an adult. And it's in that wrestle that, our children need to learn it as well. In terms of taking on the world, I think one other thing to be aware of is just boundaries. And this is different to friendships, but just boundaries with how much news you're consuming as a family or off social media. That kind of the burden of the world can feel like a burden for highly sensitive individuals. And so just not to say you don't be informed and all of that, but I would really recommend not having it playing constantly and just thinking through where can you access it when you need to, or what could that look like?
Right. Yeah. I find that my husband loves to delve into all of that. And so I always ask him for, if there's anything I need to know, just let me know. My filter, I am not going to dive into this.
Yes. And that's a perfect strategy, especially for those in our world who don't get impacted by it like we do. I think that's brilliant.
Right. Exactly. Just use them for their strength.
Yeah. So true.
So in your book, you emphasize slowing the pace of family life. What does this practically really look like? Maybe for a homeschooling family, they're juggling academics, therapy appointments, and probably a whole lot more at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, slowing is a really hard thing, I think, in family life. And it's not something that you can typically do quickly or easily, but it's essentially one of the practices. And it comes back to that concept again that a lot of times overstimulation comes from rushing and hurrying all the time.
Right.
So I definitely, before I share some of the strategies, I do just want to normalize. There are some seasons of life that you can't do this. So I just want to normalize that. As much as we would love to be in the ideal all of the time, like you said, if you're in a really heavy season of we're trying to get through all these therapy appointments, or it's just there's stuff going on.
Right.
Don't feel guilty. It is just life. So slowing is really making sure that you have some times in your day or your family rhythm that your whole family just slows down. And so this may be looking at how many extracurricular activities that you have on. It may look like, and I think there's a lot of tension there for parents, particularly if you're already spending a lot of time at therapy appointments. You think, oh, I'm doing all this other stuff. I need to give my children all these other activities as well. But extracurricular activities are great when they're serving you and your family, but they're not actually necessary for the thriving of it, if that makes sense.
Right.
So
exactly. That's a really good ruler to use.
Yeah. So if you begin to feel like this is too much for me, this is too much for my child, you're not taking away their opportunities for the future from reducing that.
Right.
Some of the practices of slowing are doing some things intentionally to help you slow down, because when we get in a state of overstimulation and stress, our adrenaline and cortisol is pumping through our body, and that's when we begin to feel like, I don't know if you've ever had those feelings of everything's important and urgent, everything.
Right. Yes.
Like I have to get to it. Everyone is annoying me. That's another part of being really stressed. Like everyone is getting on my nerves.
Right.
Inside the house and outside of the house. And we can't filter or prioritize in our brain, like, what do I actually have to do versus what could I actually let go of? Right. Whereas when we're in a slower, less stressed state, it's quite clear to us. We think, oh, I need to do these 3 things, but then these other things I could probably let go of today. It's not the end of the world. And so the practices of slowing is trying to help you move back into a little bit more of that state.
Got it.
So it's any type of grounding exercises. So anything where your feet are on grass, outside in nature, anything with water as well, like watering the garden or sitting and having a glass of cold water or a hot cup of coffee or tea. If you happen to be near water or nature or something, or just a local park, there's a lot of studies to show that just getting outside in nature has a greater impact. So even just a 10 or 20 minute walk, if you can get near green spaces or blue spaces, that has a huge impact on your stress levels reducing, even more so than just being in the city. So that's something you can do. And then there's also, this migraine, especially very stressed out parents, but you can intentionally slow yourself down. You can choose one day a week, I'm going to drive in the slow lane. One day a week, I'm going to go in the slow lane at the checkout at the grocery store. Choosing one day a week that you might cook a slower cooked meal. And again, the strategies in the book are not supposed to be a list of things that you have to do every day, every season. They're really what I wanted to offer was a toolbox that you could go to when you think, hey, I think our family life is getting a little bit fast and overwhelming. Maybe I could implement this practice at this time. So I definitely don't want it to be a sense of guilt or to do another thing for parents to feel like they have to do.
Yeah. It's just building in those white spaces too. Yeah. And we sometimes, when we've been so busy and we've been so scheduled, it feels like a waste of time. And our kids have a hard time too, because they don't know what to do with themselves. Can you talk a little bit about creative play and just the importance of that?
It's really true, because again, when we're hyper scheduled and we've been really busy, what actually happens is, if I was to come into your world right now and say, okay, you've now on a 2-week vacation and life has stopped, as of tomorrow. What actually happens neurologically because of the stress response is we go into that stress. So we stop everything we're doing. We go into a stress state first, which is why when you do have a break, you're thinking through everything that you could be doing. You feel so unproductive. You think, I really this is a waste of my time. Look at all the other things I could be doing. And then you also dip emotionally after that as well. So you come down to this, I feel heavy, I feel like life is heavier. I feel, when you just have those days and you think, I don't feel good emotionally. But if you can get through that, the high of the feeling of frenetic panic of I really should be doing other things, and you can just get through the emotional side, you then level out into a sense of the rest is really helpful for you. So I just want to say that, so for me, if I'm being intentional, if we were planning some days away, doing activities during those days that are like keeping your hands a little bit busy, not rushing or stress, but just things to kind of help you through that cognitive process that would happen. Then you can lie by the pool and read a book if any of us ever have those holidays with children.
That comes after.
Back to what you were saying.
Yes.
This space of free time and creative play is becoming more and more of a lost art. And that is because of a few things, because we are rushing through our days. And then with the invention of television decades ago and all the way with media, and all the toys that have been created for children, children are almost always entertained. And entertainment is different to play. So there's nothing wrong with entertainment. Entertainment can be great. But if you're thinking, okay, if I was to say for the next hour, all screens are off, go in, there's some toys or some things to do outside or sports or something, you work it out, and your child has no idea what to do. It may be a sign that they're just used to being entertained all the time.
Right.
And so one of the things you can do is just having some times of free play where it's also for you as a parent, because I don't know about you, but I tend to get into the trap of trying to be hyper productive all the time. So if my children are playing or they're distracted, or even if they're entertained, that's my time to kind of get everything done.
Right.
But the whole idea and the practice of free creative play is doing any activity that brings you joy. So that's so different for every person.
Absolutely.
But it could be anything from sports and movement. It could be baking. It could be gardening. It could be reading a book. It could be spending time with your favorite people. It's any activity that brings us joy. And this is a core need both for children and adults. There's a quote in the book from play expert Dr. Stuart Brown, and he says the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. And so what happens when we don't have anything in our, now, again, I want to normalize this. Family life is not always joyful, and particularly when you are raising a neurodivergent child, it can be particularly challenging at times. But if there's never any joy in your life, you will find that the energy reserves you have to bring to home life is kind of sucked dry.
Absolutely.
And so again, just having those small things, like this is why I never want parents and mums to feel guilty. Like, what's your hobby? What's that thing you love? Like in those gaps of time, do those things because it brings you joy, and then you come back a better mum to your children, and it's giving them an example of living a life that has joy in it.
Yes, it completely does. And excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. But yes, having that ability to say, it's okay if I take that break, if I, have that downtime, and knowing that cycle is going to happen that you were talking about earlier, where you are going to be stressed as you're trying to move from one thing to the other. That's, it just really helps with being able to go, okay, this is natural. This is what I'm supposed to be going through. Yes. And yet when I get to the other side, I'll feel better. And I live two different worlds because I have two different businesses. And so my one is my fun business. This one is more work. So it's still fun when I talk to people, but I go hang from a ceiling and do acrobatics. I'm an aerialist. And,
oh my goodness.
And so when I go to the studio, I lose myself. And even though I'm teaching kids, I love it. And when I come back, all the stresses that I left at home earlier, I don't even remember what they are.
Yes, that is the perfect example, because that flow state that you're talking about that you get into, that is the definition of play. If you ever see, this particularly happens with children who are neurodivergent, if they ever get into their Lego and they're just in their zone and you're like, oh, do I have like a whole day of free time right now?
Right, yes.
It's that sense of flow that happens that, like you said, at the end of it, you just think, do I have any stress? Is there, life feels like better again, because life can start to feel very dark when it's just work and hustle and hurry all the time. We need those moments to kind of be like, okay, life is good. Life can be great.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So, if we've had kids that kind of are, using a lot of social media and tech and things like that, how do you kind of put the boundaries on that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm always, again, want to be really gentle, particularly with families who have neurodivergent children, because sometimes screens are the only thing that's helping you cope in life. So I just want to
Right.
say that again from the outset, no guilt. I outline kind of a framework in the book that talks
Okay.
about moving from kind of when they're younger,
Yeah.
slower and less stimulating media up until, introducing smartphones and social media as late as you can. And again, that's
Right.
different per family. But I think the biggest thing is having boundaries in your home. Like, it may seem simple, but there is just so many people who just don't have it. So it
Right.
doesn't matter what your boundaries look like, because every family is different, but just having some so that your child or teen can't have unrestricted access to screens whenever and wherever. They need to know how to say no at some point, how we turn off. And
Right.
all parents know this, and particularly parents of neurodivergent kids. Screens are sometimes the only time our child is actually calm.
Right.
And yet at the same time, it is a stimulator. So
Right.
it's important to consider the whole of life, making sure they're having movement and that sort of stuff as well. The second boundary I would really just recommend to parents is, where you can, try and keep the screens in the family area. And that's particularly, when for children and early teens, and as long as you can, it just gives a level of protection where you're seeing what they're watching. There's a level of accountability, so they're seeing, they know you're watching what you're watching. And that can just be a simple thing that you can do to kind of just protect your family. Again, like I said, there's a framework in the book, but I think it's important for families what I wanted to do is empower families with because I just believe that parents know their children the best, and every situation is unique. And that's one of the problems with all this information online.
Right. We tend to generalize it so much.
Yes. Yeah. And what works for children, some children does not work for others. And you can't generalize parenting advice for non-neurodivergent kids and assume it's going to work the same as neurodivergent children. And so I just am hoping the information is empowering, and then you can do what you want with that for your family.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I think that's like a sigh of relief, because I know I always felt guilty letting my kids game and those types of things. And then I've talked about this on other podcast episodes. My oldest is a biomedical engineer, and he still games while he works because it helps him to process things. And he's very successful, and he wrote his best college papers doing that. And I'm like, I just give up, because if this helps you find your calm, then I'm not going to stand in the way of doing that. And so I love that you approach it on an individual and family basis, because it is so unique for our kids.
Yes. But it's so true what you said. I haven't spoken to, I can't count. There's no parent I've ever spoken to that doesn't feel a layer of guilt about screens. And I think it's just we have different guilt about, depending on our situation. But like what you said, it's true. There is an element of gaming that seems to calm and match a neurodivergent mind. And so there is that element that's different to other children. So again, it's like, your child best. The biggest thing is like that feeling of like, if you begin to feel, hey, I feel like this screen time is like turning our family stressful, or it's not having that calming effect anymore, or it's actually harming, that's when I want parents to feel empowered of like, okay, maybe we need to try something different. So it's just about paying attention to those signs. What we don't want to use screens for is just like throw the screens unrestricted, no boundaries, and I'm never going to think about how it's impacting you. It is just it's one of those annoying wrestles about parenting in the modern world.
It really is. Yes. And I mean, we wrestle with so many other things. And it's like, what exactly are they struggling with? I have no idea. And you just kind of, I mean, it's a guessing game. And if we can look at it like that and we just come to know our children better every step of the way, it's the process. And we aren't going to know everything. I mean, all my kids are adults now, and I'm like, look back and go, man, if I'd only known, but I didn't know. And so there's grace. I'm just giving myself grace.
Yeah, absolutely. Grace is so important.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you talk about parenting as a journey towards emotional maturity, not perfection too. And so what does it look like to grow alongside your child as you work on your own reactions and rhythms?
Yeah, I believe that parenthood is one of the greatest invitations that we receive to grow in our emotional and spiritual maturity. And not everyone accepts that invitation. So I just want to say that it's not to say that every parent becomes more mature as they grow, but there's something about the acceptance of the responsibility of cultivating and raising another life that and also the unique situations around it, the sleep deprivation, how much sacrifice you have to give in to the child, how much you have to learn how to navigate situations you've never learned before, create a very unique pathway for us to really grow. So again, parenting is not about, you're never going to become a perfect parent. It doesn't matter what strategies that we do, there's no way. And that's why in my work, I focus a lot on building resilience and emotional health in children. And the number one predictor of that is a connected relationship with a healthy adult. So it's not perfect adult, just a healthy adult, and the connection. So before I go into the emotional maturity things, it's important just to say learning to repair when there's been a rupture, learning to just say I'm sorry when you've lost it. Like that creates health, that creates connection. So that's really important. But as we grow, hopefully we are also growing in our own emotional maturity, because that allows us to be a gift to the people in our world. And we want to grow because we're the leader in our home. And so a lot of that comes with learning emotional coping skills as well, which is some of the stuff we've talked about. I go into more skills in the book. But just learning to have a sense of awareness of who we are, because hopefully as we grow older, we grow wiser as well.
It's hopefully.
Yes. It's not something that happens instantly when the baby's handed to us. We think, oh my goodness, I feel like a child raising a child. But it's like that growth is something that we can do along the way.
Absolutely. That's so good. And and it is about a lot of that repair. It's about grace. It's about, the forgiveness, and those are such great skills for our kids to watch us model, instead of just saying, well, I did it perfect. So, because we're expecting perfection out of them then, and we know we can't.
Yes. No, it's so true. It's a core relationship building skill that if they don't see it at home, they're never going to know it's a normal part of marriage. It's a normal part of raising children. It's a normal part of friendship. It's a normal part of even work relationships. It is an important thing for them to see. And also it is what keeps the connection, because if a child doesn't feel connected with an adult, what you're going to see in the short term is just more challenging behavior, more emotional meltdowns. And it's not to say that connection solves everything, but that connection is what gives you influence in their life. And so just that repair of like, hey, I was not perfect this afternoon, or how I handled this situation, or whatever it is, it shows them that you're human, they're human, and I love you, and we're going to keep going at this. And so it's such an amazing foundation for family life.
Absolutely. Yes. And we've got to operate from there, because that's how God sees us. We're not perfect. We're being perfected.
Yes.
Through a lot of bumbling and falling down.
Yes, so, that's exactly right.
So if a parent listening today and they're feeling overwhelmed or discouraged, what's one small first step that they can take this week to kind of turn down the noise in their home?
Yeah. So I think the thing I would encourage parents to do as a first step is just to recognize your limitations, that you're not a machine.
Yeah.
And what can you do today or sometime this week to give yourself a break? So that may look like putting your phone in the kitchen at night and not sleeping next to it. It may look like having some time of journaling or prayer first thing in the morning before you get going in your day. It may look like not feeling guilty when you sit outside and take 15 minutes for a cup of coffee because you just needed a moment from your children, and not placing a layer of guilt upon yourself for that. Those small incremental moments of space and of rest are actually really important. They're going to help your prefrontal cortex come back on. They're going to help you feel better about life. And so just that, it's annoying. I wish we could be limitless, but just just that feeling like a reminder, we're human. You actually, and I would always encourage parents, like you actually need, it's okay that you need to take care of yourself. Like it's not a failure or something that you should feel guilty about. It's a normal part of raising children.
That's so beautiful. Yes, I love that because we're not told that enough. And then, in our population, I've said this many times on this podcast because it becomes personal to me because I had cancer in 2020 and, that our parents, when they come across a diagnosis like that, the death rate increased by 50% because of the stress level in our lives. And, that's an epidemic because we are not taking care of ourselves and we have to realize what is causing this stress and this overwhelm. And so I'm just thankful for people like you that are, making it known that this is what you can do. It's not that hard. You need to recognize it and you need to do something about it instead of just saying there's something wrong with me. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more of your book. It just released in April and people can find it just about anywhere, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's available wherever books are sold. It's Turn Down the Noise. If you go to my website at sarahboyd.co, just .co, there are some free downloads you can get with the book. There's a guide on how to calm an overstimulated child or teen and a guide on how to make a kind of sensory calming toolbox, and you can get those with the book as well.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. Well, we'll make sure to add all of that into the show notes so that you can all just hit the button, click on it, and you won't have to remember how to spell it. We'll take care of that for you. So
thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This has been it's been an encouraging conversation to me. And so I'm assuming it's going to be very encouraging to my listeners as well.
Thank you so much for having me, Peggy. I really appreciate it. I love everything that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Well, your insights were definitely a gift to me today. And I'm sure to every parent that hears this and reads your book, who kind of feel like, the weight of the world is in this fast-paced world is just like gnawing at them. And it doesn't have to, which is such a relief.
Yes, it's so true.
Yeah. Well, if you're listening and feeling inspired, maybe just relieved you are not alone, be sure to check out Sarah's book, Turn Down the Noise. You'll find powerful framework in there, relatable stories, and practical tools that can help your family move from survival mode to emotional health and the thriving connections. And don't forget to visit resilientlittlehearts.com and sarahboyd.co for more information and resources, and also head over to spedhomeschool.com to Homeschool Heroes to connect with our community, find support, and access our growing library of free resources. So thanks for being on the show. Thanks for all of you for joining us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend who needs encouragement today. And until next time, keep going. You're doing a sacred work in your homeschool and in your home. Thanks, everybody. Take care. God bless. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Bankson, a board-certified clinical neuropsychologist and host of your Hope-Filled Perspective podcast. After 30 years in the mental health field, I am passionate about helping you regain hope and transform your life. Join me and my amazing guests as we tackle real-life struggles with compassion, vulnerability, and biblically based insights. If you're ready to renew your mind and find practical solutions to life's most common concerns, subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform.